On July 21st, Google posted something most people scroll straight past. Two lines, no number, no specs, just one big claim.
Google said they'd started pre training Gemini 4 and called it their most ambitious run yet. I saw that post, and within a day, my feed was already full of leaked spec sheets and screenshots claiming to know exactly what's inside it. So I went back and traced every single one of those claims to its actual source. And what I found genuinely surprised me.
So in this video, I'm going to walk you through exactly what Google has confirmed about Gemini 4.
What credible reporting actually supports, and what the roadmap makes plausible clearly separated. So, you're not the person repeating a fake spec sheet the next time this comes up. We're also going to line Gemini 4 up against the actual current flagships from OpenAI, Anthropic, and Meta so you can see exactly where the real bar sits today. First, though, let's go back to that original post because that one line is really the whole official story so far. The entire confirmed story. In 1 minute, here's exactly what that post said and everything Google has added to it since. On the 21st of July 2026, Google said it had started pre training Gemini 4 and it called the run its most ambitious ever. Alphabet repeated that same line during its Q2 earnings communications. That's it. That's the full extent of what Google has officially said about Gemini 4 as a product.
But here's where it gets interesting.
Reuters followed up, and CEO Sundar Pichai described Gemini 4 to them as a significantly larger frontier model. That's a real attributed quote, and it's the closest thing we have to an official scale signal. Notice what it doesn't tell us though. Larger parameters, larger active parameters, larger training compute, larger data set, or some combination of all four. Google hasn't defined which. As of August 5, there's no Gemini 4 listing anywhere in Google's own API catalog. No model card, no benchmark report, no price sheet, no release date. So, if a video, a tweet, or a leaked screenshot hands you an exact number for any of that right now, you're not looking at a leak. You're looking at a guess dressed up as a fact. Stronger coding agents, computer use, multimodal reasoning, long context research, more reliable tool execution, and better intelligence per dollar. So remember that. Split as we go, the direction is visible, the specifications are not. What Gemini 4 actually is right now.
Let's back up and put it in context.
Because Gemini 4 doesn't exist in a vacuum. It's the next chapter in a story Google's been building for over 2 years. Gemini 1 was Google's first real swing at native multimodality. Gemini 1.5 followed with a huge leap in context length and a sparse mixture of experts design under the hood. Then Gemini 2 shifted the whole pitch toward what Google called the agentic era native tool use, multimodal generation, models that could actually do things instead of just answering questions. Gemini 2.5 pushed deliberate reasoning into the spotlight, and Gemini 3 doubled down hard on software engineering, multimodal interfaces, search, and multi step agent workflows. Follow that pattern, and Gemini 4's likely purpose becomes pretty clear. Pull all of those threads into one more general agent, something that can see, hear, read, search, write code, operate tools, and hold on to a plan across long multi step tasks without losing the thread.
But I want to flag something most coverage glosses over.
I said probably and likely on purpose. Google has not published a Gemini 4 feature list, and because this announcement landed at the pre training stage, before instruction tuning, before safety testing, before any of the work that actually shapes a model's final behavior, it's entirely possible Google itself doesn't know yet which of these capabilities will survive the rest of the pipeline intact. That's not a knock on Google. That's just how early this really is. Specifications, architecture, and hardware, the part everyone's faking. This is where most of the internet's Gemini 4 leaks fall apart. So let's go through it piece by piece. Start with size. There is no confirmed parameter count for Gemini 4. Not 1 trillion, not 5 trillion, not 10. Reuters significantly larger line from Pichai is credible, but it's qualitative, not a number. And it still doesn't tell us whether larger means total parameters, active parameters, training compute, or multimodal data volume. Architecture is just as open. Gemini 1.5 Pro was confirmed as a sparse mixture of experts. Transformer, meaning only part of the network actually fires for any given token, which lets a model carry more total capacity without paying the full inference cost of a dense model every single time. Here's a useful real world comparison. Meta's Llama 4 Maverick uses that same broad idea with around 400 billion total parameters, but only about 17 billion active per token. So even if a Gemini 4 has X trillion parameters rumor turns out to have the right number in it, without knowing the active parameter count, that number alone tells you almost nothing about how the model actually behaves or what it costs to run. It would be reasonable for Google to keep leaning on sparsity, expert routing, or improved attention, but none of it is confirmed for Gemini 4 specifically. The chip question is just as murky and honestly kind of fascinating once you see the options on the table. Google's TPU lineup has evolved fast. Trillium boosted per chip compute and memory over the older TPU was 5e. Ironwood can scale into accelerator domains as large as 9,216 chips. And TPU 8 tons is designed specifically to improve training performance per dollar. Any of these or some mix of them could plausibly be training Gemini 4 right now. But no official source has tied Gemini 4 to a specific chip generation, a chip count, or an interconnect setup. Training tokens, data composition, total flops, cluster size, training duration, energy use, every one of those is currently unspecified. Performance and benchmarks, because right now there are zero.
Let's be blunt. There are actually zero verified Gemini 4 benchmark scores.
Not on humanities last exam, not GPQA, not ARCAGI, not SWE bench, not terminal bench, not MMMU, not LM Arena, and there's no reliable hands-on report either because nobody outside Google has verified access to the model yet. So, what's the best reference point we actually have? That's Gemini 3.6 Flash, the model actually running right now. On the two hardest reasoning benchmarks, 92.8% on GPQA Diamond and 38.3% on Humanities last exam, both independently measured by artificial analysis, but flipped to agentic and coding work, 58.7% on SWE bench, 78% on Terminal Bench 2.1, and 83% on OS World verified for computer use. Genuinely strong numbers, just not strong in the same direction as Pro. But, and this is the part I really want you to walk away with, benchmark comparisons deserve real caution. Some tests allow tool use, some don't. Coding scores can swing hard depending on the agent harness, how many attempts a model gets, its reasoning budget, or whether it has terminal access. Even Google's own evaluation notes point out that a lot of competitor numbers floating around are self reported by each provider rather than measured under one shared neutral setup. That's why a credible Gemini 4 launch needs to give us more than a single flashy percentage pass at one results. Identical harnesses across models, token usage, real wall clock latency, cost per completed task, failure rates, and long duration agent tests. And one more myth worth killing right here. ML Perf is not an intelligence leaderboard. It measures how efficiently a system trains or serves a defined workload. And its recent LLM benchmarks have used open models like Llama 3.1405B, DeepSeek R1, and GPT OSS not closed Gemini checkpoints. There is no Gemini 4 ML Perf result, and there won't be one that answers, is it smarter, even when there is. Features, context, tools, and APIs to actually watch for.
If we can't talk specs yet, then what should we be watching when Gemini 4 does surface?
First, multimodality. Gemini 3.6 Flash already handles text, images, video, audio, and PDFs. So, a flagship successor dropping any of those would be a genuine surprise. Can Gemini 4 natively produce richer outputs like synchronized audio, interactive interfaces, image or video generation, or direct computer actions through one unified model? Instead of stitching several separate systems together behind the scenes? Second context, Gemini 3.6 Flash currently supports roughly 1 million input tokens, and Gemini 1.5 demonstrated up to 10 million tokens in research settings, even though the broadly available production limit stayed lower. So Gemini 4 could push raw context length further. But here's the real test, and it's the one almost nobody talks about: usable context. Can the model actually retrieve specific details buried deep in a million token conversation, reason across them accurately, resist getting distracted by irrelevant material, and still hold on to its original plan near the very end of that session? A bigger number on a spec sheet means nothing if the model forgets what you told it 40 minutes ago. Third, tools and agents, which is arguably where the real competition is happening. Current Gemini APIs support function calling, structured responses, code execution, search grounding, URL context, and caching. And Gemini 3 shipped across the Gemini app, AI Studio, Vertex AI, Gemini CLI, Android Studio, Anti Gravity, and multiple third party coding tools. None of that is confirmed for Gemini 4 yet. Same goes for fine tuning, adapters, batch inference, live streaming, deterministic modes, and on device variants. But if I had to guess where the biggest real world win will come from, it's not a new checkbox on a feature list at all. It's reliability, fewer failed tool calls, better recovery after something breaks mid task, more stable long horizon plans, and lower cost across extended agent sessions. That's the unglamorous stuff that actually determines whether you trust this thing to run unsupervised for an hour. How Gemini 4 stacks up against its own family, and the competition.
Zoom out for a second. Gemini's whole progression reads like a shifting focus generation to generation.
Gemini 1 was about native multimodality, then long context. Gemini 2 shifted to agents and native tool use. Gemini 2.5 made reasoning the headline feature. Gemini 3 combined reasoning with coding, search, interface generation, and computer use workflows. Gemini 4 looks like a scale up of that same agentic strategy. But again, Google hasn't confirmed the specifics. So treat that as an educated read on the pattern, not a leak. Now let's put it up against the field, because this is where things get genuinely useful for you. And I want to be clear, these are the models actually holding the flagship spot right now, not the ones everyone still defaults to, citing out of habit. Against OpenAI's GPT-5.6 Sol, which reached general availability on the 9th of July 2026 at $5 per million input tokens and $30 per million output. The story is efficiency plus specialization. OpenAI built Sol specifically around coding, cybersecurity, and scientific work, and says it beats competing frontier models using fewer tokens and less time per task. Gemini's structural advantage against it is still context. Recent Gemini Pro models sit around a million input tokens, well beyond what GPT 5.6 offers by default. If Gemini 4 wants to keep that edge, it needs to hold the context lead while matching Sol's efficiency per dollar story. Against Claude, and full disclosure, I'm obviously not neutral here. The model actually carrying Anthropic's daily workload right now is Claude Opus 5, launched the 24th of July 2026 at $5 input and $25 output per million tokens. It more than doubled its predecessor's score on Anthropic's own frontier bench evaluation and is positioned as reaching close to the capability of Anthropic's top tier Fable 5 model at half the price. That's the bar on the agentic coding side: strong reasoning, sustained tool use, and real cost discipline, not just a bigger number on a leaderboard. Against Meta, the comparison has actually changed shape entirely since the last time most creators covered this. Meta's frontier flagship in 2026 isn't Llama 4 anymore. The company's superintelligence labs group pivoted to Muse Spark, a proprietary model that broke from Meta's long running open weight strategy. MuseSpark's latest version runs a million token context window at roughly $1.25 per million input tokens and 425 output. And Meta positions it as a frontier tier competitor to the current GPT, Claude, and Gemini flagships. Llama remains available as Meta's open weight option, but it's no longer the model carrying Meta's frontier ambitions, which is a genuine strategic pivot worth knowing, especially if you still think of Meta as the open one. By default, release date, pricing, and where you'll actually be able to use it.
Let's talk timing and money. Two things everyone actually wants to know, but Google has said the least about these two.
There is no exact Gemini 4 release date. Google's last three major generations landed in December 2023, December 2024, and November 2025, an annual cadence that makes a late 2026 announcement tempting to bet on. But pre training only started in July 2026, and Google was still actively rolling out Gemini 3.5 and 3.6 products at that same moment. Reuters also separately reported uncertainty around the timing of Gemini 3.5 Pro, which is a good reminder that even Google's own schedules can slip. My forecast lands on a restricted preview somewhere between December 2026 and June 2027, with broader availability following after that low confidence. And I want to be clear about that every time I say it. Pricing is completely unspecified. For reference, Gemini 3.6 Flash currently runs $1.50 per million input tokens and $7.50 per million output tokens. And unlike Pro, holds that flat rate even past 200,000 tokens instead of jumping to a higher long context rate. Gemini 4 could land more expensive, similarly priced, or get split into Pro, Flash, and Lite tiers the way past generations have. And no consumer plan, API tire, Vertex AI deployment, country list, or regional rollout has been announced. So don't assume Gemini 4 access comes bundled into Google AI Pro or Ultra until Google actually says so in writing. What this could actually be useful for, assuming Gemini 4 delivers on the direction we've been tracing, its best use cases probably aren't single shot answers. They're the tasks that require sticking with something over time. For software teams, that could look like analyzing a full repository, reproducing a bug, editing several files at once, running the test suite, reading the failures, and iterating without losing sight of the original goal. For research work, it could mean searching the web, working through hundreds of documents, pulling out claims and citations, running the actual calculations, catching contradictions, and producing something you could genuinely audit. For enterprises, picture one: permission aware workflow that pulls together documents, video calls, spreadsheets, email, and internal databases instead of five disconnected tools. For everyday consumers, it could mean a live assistant that actually sees through your camera, understands speech naturally, references your personal context with permission, and takes real actions across Google's ecosystem. And for science and engineering, long context, multimodal reasoning could mean comparing papers side by side, inspecting experimental imagery, writing analysis code, and operating specialist tools in one continuous session. There's no evidence yet that Gemini 4 can complete a multi hour task more reliably than Gemini 3.6 already does. And there's no evidence it'll be affordable enough to actually run those workflows at scale. Exciting direction. Zero proof yet. The privacy and safety question nobody's asking loudly enough. Here's something that matters more the more agentic these models get. A more capable Gemini needs more access. Email, files, calendars, code, your browser sessions, your camera, your organization's internal data. The more it can do for you, the more it has to see. Google's current policies actually differ quite a bit depending on where you're using it. In the consumer Gemini app, temporary chats aren't used to train Google's models. In the API, content sent through unpaid services can be used to improve Google's products, while prompts and responses from paid services reportedly aren't. Workspace has its own separate promise that customer prompts aren't used to train generative models without explicit permission. Gemini 4's exact retention, training, and human review policies simply haven't been announced yet. Google also runs something called the Frontier Safety Framework, which evaluates risks like chemical and biological misuse, cybersecurity threats, manipulation, and misalignment. Gemini 3.6 Flash's safety assessment just leans on the earlier 3.1 Pro evaluation, not a fresh one. And there's still no Gemini 4 safety report or model card to point to yet. So here's the standard I'd hold Gemini 4 to. And honestly, the standard I'd hold any of these companies to. Bigger capability has to come with clearer data controls, visible permission boundaries, audit logs for whatever the agent actually does on your behalf, independent evaluation, and documentation you can actually read. So, is Gemini 4 about to change the AI market? Possibly. But the honest answer, after going through everything Google, Reuters, and Google's own technical reports have actually said, is that it's simply too early to know. Here's what the official record supports. Google has started an unusually ambitious pre training run. Credible reporting says the model is significantly larger, and Google's own model and hardware roadmap points toward multimodal agents, coding, tool use, and efficiency as the priorities. But everything you'd actually need to judge the finished product architecture, context, benchmarks, latency, cost, safety results, release date is still missing.
My verdict in one line: high strategic significance, extremely low specification certainty.
So don't judge Gemini 4 of a rumored parameter count or an anonymous benchmark screenshot someone posted at 2 a.m. Judge it when Google actually publishes a model card, opens an API, runs transparent evaluations, sets real pricing, and lets independent testers measure reliability per dollar in workflows that actually matter. I'll be tracking every one of those milestones as they land, so subscribe if you want the full benchmark breakdown. The moment real evidence shows up, not the fake one that's already circulating.
I actually want to know what you think. Should Google be prioritizing raw intelligence, faster agents, bigger context window, or just lower prices? Tell me in the comments. I read each and every one of your comment, and it genuinely shapes what I cover next.